This is a window. More specifically, it's a window from which 2 men and 1 man fell, and this window changed the world. Now, do you think of change as a gentle stream or a sudden earthquake? In other words, is it slow and steady or fast and furious? I think we all intuitively understand that the world is always changing. But when it comes to big picture things like geopolitics or culture or society, it feels like change is often slow, predictable, almost boring. Revolution is something we see in the rearview mirror after it's already happened. When looking back, we can clearly identify the series of events that mark the transition from before to after. But while gradual change certainly exists, the most impactful shifts in history and in our personal lives are often sudden, violent, and completely irreversible. They are moments when our reality is shattered, and we have no choice but to pick up the pieces and start again. Moments like the Defenestration of Prague. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but it doesn't matter because you were going to look it up anyway. So here's the situation. It's early 17th century Europe, and you've got this one dude named Ferdinand II. He's the king of the Kingdom of Bohemia, which today is the Czech Republic, except back then it was a part of this larger thing called the Holy Roman Empire. Anyway, in this religiously divided patchwork quilt of a continent, Ferdinand rules over a mostly Catholic domain, sandwiched between 2 powerful Protestant nations, and his throne is a powder keg just waiting for a spark. See, in 1617, his officials halted the construction of a Protestant church, which was kind of a big deal. And the nobles of Bohemia weren't having it. They confronted the king's 2 top advisors, who were Catholics, and demanded they leave Bohemia. When the king's reps said no, they grabbed the 2 regents and their secretary and threw them out of a 3rd-story window. Now, depending on the source, before they hit the ground, they were cushioned either by divine intervention or a pile of manure. But either way, none of them died. And yet that didn't really matter because in that moment of defiance, the die was cast. This act of violence triggered a revolt, which quickly escalated into the 30 Years' War, a multi-phase conflict fought over religion and power that would claim millions of lives and decimate entire regions of Europe. In other words, it changed the world. Because while the war didn't end for another 30 years, the rules of Europe would never be the same. By the end, the Peace of Westphalia, the war's final peace treaty, would lay the foundation for the modern concept of nation-states and sovereignty. The map of Europe was redrawn, and the continent would never be whole again. And that's why studying history is so important. Because when we zoom out, we can see that sometimes the biggest changes come from the smallest sparks. A disagreement in a single room, a disagreement over windows, over the right to worship, over the threat of losing one's head. That's what leads to war. That's what leads to change. But what does that mean for us? Well, I believe that each of us has our own defenestration moments. Those times when we're unexpectedly and dramatically pushed out the window of our comfortable reality. I'm talking about those times when everything we knew and relied upon suddenly changes. We're laid off from a job we thought was stable, or a long-term relationship ends abruptly, or we receive a sudden health diagnosis. For some of you, your defenestration moment was May 2020, when the world shut down and you were forced to redefine your life in the midst of a global pandemic. The truth is, change is a constant, and the only thing we can control is how we respond to it. Sometimes we have a say in that change. Other times, it's thrust upon us. But either way, we are all, at some point, pushed out the window of our comfortable reality, and we must learn how to land. It's not always easy. It's not always pretty. There will be bruises and scars, but we will land. And in doing so, we will find new ways to adapt, discover previously unknown reserves of strength and resilience, and ultimately define a new reality for ourselves. Because while the devastation caused by the Defenestration of Prague led to the deaths of hundreds of thousands, perhaps even millions of people, it also gave birth to a new world, a new political order that continues to shape the continent to this very day. So, yes, change is painful, but it's inevitable. And sometimes, just sometimes, it's absolutely necessary. If you enjoyed this thought trek, I'd be honored if you shared it with a friend. And if you haven't already subscribed, please do. Until next time, thank you so much for watching.